So we're pleased to present tonight's debate in conjunction with our media partner for tonight, the Lowell Sun. The Sun has long pursued a similar mission of promoting civic engagement and enhancing understanding of the political process. It's my pleasure to introduce the moderator for tonight's debate. Chris Scott is the enterprise editor for the newspaper and has been with the Sun, and I verified this with him earlier because I couldn't believe it, 36 years, and I know he started when he was very young. Chris has been the recipient. No comment, okay. We'll check your CV afterward and make sure it's true. Chris has been the recipient of many awards for his journalistic work through the New England Press Association. I know that he will help us all get a much better understanding of the issues in this election coming up in a mere 19 days. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chris Scott.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thanks for attending. We're pleased to be partnering with UMass Lowell tonight, and I want to thank DJ Cochran and Patty McCafferty for helping us put this together. I'd like to just acknowledge my boss, Jim Campanini, who's in the office tonight, this evening. He and I have organized many of these debates over the last several years, and they've been pretty well received. So without further ado, let's bring in the candidates, and then I'll just get into a couple of the ground rules, and then we'll get going. They're approaching from the rear. We're going to go in alphabetical order. John, Robert. So as most of you probably know, these are the 5 Democrats vying to replace Eileen Donahue as the state senator from the 1st Middlesex district. With me to my left is John Drinkwater from Lowell. John is the legislative director for the Mass AFL-CIO, correct?
Correct.
Very good, thank you. Rodney Elliott, I've known Rodney for a long time. He's a member of the city council, and he is a former mayor. To his left is another longtime city councilor. He's had a lot of political hats over the years. He's also a former mayor, Ed Kennedy. And to his left is another former mayor. Man, 3, that's kind of crazy. Bill Martin, another former city councilor and mayor. And to Bill's left is the only non-Lowellian in the race, but he was born and raised in Lowell, right? Yes. Terry Ryan from Westford, who was a former member of the Westford School Committee, correct?
Yes.
So gentlemen, thank you for coming tonight, and thank you for participating. I'll just get into a couple of the ground rules, and then we'll get going. The questions are going to be read to you tonight by Sun reporter Rick Sobey and UMass Lowell student Ryan Callahan? Ryan Callahan. He's from Chelmsford, and he's a political science major here at the university. So just a couple for rules. There will be no opening statements, but you will get a 90-second closing statement. Each of you will be given 1 minute to answer the question. The timekeeper is another UMass Lowell student right in front of us. I forget your name? Jack both. And he'll ring a Salvation Army bell that has become ubiquitous in these Sun debates, courtesy of my boss. And if one of you has a burning desire to respond to what someone else said in the previous round, we'll give you that opportunity. The less people hear of me and the more they hear of you, that's what we're here for. So without further delay, let's get right to the questions. Can we put number 1 on the screen? And Rick Sobey will start the questioning.
If elected, will you work full-time as state senator, or will you maintain a full-time job, part-time job, or elected position as well?
John? Yes.
So if elected, I will serve as a full-time state senator and step down from my current position as legislative director for the Massachusetts AFL-CIO. I believe the job has certainly prepared me well in terms of advocating for issues that impact working families throughout this Commonwealth. I think, advocating for these sorts of issues is a great qualification. However, to serve in both of those positions full-time would, represent a bit of a conflict of interest that I readily acknowledge. So certainly intend to devote 100% of my time to this Senate seat in this Senate district if fortunate enough to be elected.
Thank you, John. Rodney Elliott?
I would serve as a full-time city council. I took that pledge back in February when I decided to run, It's a full-time job with a full-time salary representing 150,000 people in this district. I think the dynamics of the job has changed. You have to be in the towns, you have to be in the city, you have to be at Beacon Hill. My time spent in the towns, they feel neglected, that they want more representation in the towns. So I would not hold a second office. I don't feel it's fair to taxpayers. I don't think it's fair to the people that we represent. And both jobs take a lot of time. So I would step down as a city councilor. I also don't feel that anyone should hold a second job, whether it's running a business, a law firm, or a real estate practice. So it's a full-time job, and I commit to being a full-time state senator.
Thank you, Rodney. Ed Kennedy?
Thank you. I thought we covered this morning in the Lowell Sun, but
I don't know what you're talking about.
right. I would be a full-time state senator. I would not work as a commercial real estate appraiser. I did make a commitment last fall. I was supported by a group of people that were interested in a new high school downtown. I made a commitment to those people, and I expect to stick through that. When I first announced, several people approached me and asked me about that commitment and whether I would hold it. So what I've told people is that if I'm elected to the state senate, I will remain on the city council until the vote on the loan order, which I anticipate would probably be maybe in May or June, which is just a few months. I would point out that there have been people in the Commonwealth that have held both positions. Tim Toomey from Cambridge was a state representative and a city councilor in Cambridge for 20 years. And there are certainly a lot of other instances, but I do not think that 5 months serving on the city council and the state senate is going to do anybody any harm. And I feel like I should fulfill that commitment that I made.
Thank you. I have a feeling we might come back to this. Councilor Martin?
Thanks. So I'm a practicing attorney, and I would continue to do that. I think, and I think that's important. I think that's informs me and makes me the person I am. I think what makes me who is the best candidate for this race. I think I have in the past represented developers, complicated tax credit financings, simple things like people that come into your office and have an issue with a non-compete clause, legislation just addressed this year. I think my experience helps me to have perspective and do a good job as a senator. I think that's why people should vote for me. And I think we have a history in this district of attorneys representing this district and representing it well. Senator Eileen Donahue, practicing attorney. Senator Steve Pangiatakis, practicing attorney. Senator Dan Leahy, practicing attorney. I think all the experience you gain as an attorney helps you do this job. And I don't know why anyone would want me to give that up and lose that perspective.
Thank you. Terry Ryan?
My short answer would be, it will be my full-time job. To do the job and to do it right, to spend the right amount of time in Boston, the right amount of time in the district, it is a full-time position. I'm not a lawyer, I'm an engineer. I spend a lot of time looking at data, making a case. So I think in order to do the job right, I want to focus on talking with the people, meeting the people, finding out what the issues are throughout the district, and being a full-time representative is the only way that you can do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Are we all set with this? Second question goes to Ryan Callahan.
Considering it's safe to say we all know someone in some way who has been affected by the opioid epidemic, how would you work closely with a Republican governor in order to get important legislation passed that would stop the needless deaths of our friends and family?
Councilor Elliott?
Thank you. It's one of the most important issues, if not the most important issues, confronting certainly the city, the state, the country. I can and would work with the governor. I have a very good relationship with him. I believe we need to continue to expand treatment of beds, which is included in this year's fiscal year budget, to 1,100. I believe that we need to expand the support network of those individuals coming out of recovery to include support right back home, whether it's counseling centers and recovery coaches. I believe that's the next step that we need to take in order to continue to do this. I believe that there needs to be rehabilitation for those individuals in prisons. They need, before they come back out, to reduce the recidivism. So I think there's a variety of issues that I would work with the governor. I think it's one of the top priorities, including things like health insurance coverage for those individuals who have gone to treatment for 30-day stays. So I think there's lots of work that needs to be done. We've seen an increase, and I'm committed to work with the governor. I have a very good relationship with.
Thank you. Councilor Kennedy?
Thank you. I think that the The initiatives that the governor has put forth have been worthwhile. I think that the city of Lowell has done more on this issue than probably most other communities. However, to this point, we've not been successful. So more needs to be done. And I think that as a state senator, what I would support is more treatment beds. I think that that's necessary. I would support education, both in the schools and in the hospitals. I think that that's necessary, and I think that anybody that comes into a hospital to have an operation that's going to have to leave with opiates should have some education on how to handle those opiates. I think, though, that really the crux of the problem lies with the federal government. The federal government just has to do something about big pharmaceutical companies, and the federal government has to do something about big distribution companies. But in the meantime, I would support, I do think what we're doing is the best we can. I think we can do more.
Thank you. Bill Martin?
Yes, so I think the legislation that just recently passed is a good first step, but only a first step. I think it makes a good effort at reducing the overprescribing that occurs in physicians' offices and other places. And I think it also is an attempt to establish protocols for treatment, because some of the treatment that people get varies widely. I think the thing we need the most and need to focus more on is aftercare, and it's very intensive, very expensive, and not well done anywhere on a broad scale. There's a recent company in the news, Column Healthcare, that has had some success, but with 8 patients at a time. They're looking to expand, but they've had very good success. It's very intensive treatment. I think that's what we need to do more of and monitor companies like that, mimic their success.
Terry Ryan?
Okay, thanks. The opioid problem is not a Democratic issue. It's not a Republican issue. Okay, I support the governor's bill that he just signed last week. It's a great first step. I also look to collaborate with the ongoing task force that Marion Ryan conducts monthly up at Lowell General Hospital. Now, that task force is made up of professionals in the medical industry, healthcare, public safety, and there's data provided by Trinity UMass that's updated monthly. They look at trends on a weekly, monthly basis. They're looking at where the drugs are coming from. They're looking at what drugs are out there and who's taking them, and that data changes monthly. So as your state senator, I would work directly with that task force and implement some of the latest and greatest ideas that they're pushing to address this issue on a weekly and monthly basis, because this disease is moving. It's affecting different people at different times.
And back to John Drinkwater at the start.
Sure. Well, I'll name one very specific way where I'd love to actually work with the governor on the opioid crisis, and that is the 72-hour hold in emergency rooms that he proposed as part of his original opioid legislation, which unfortunately wasn't adopted in the final bill passed by the legislature. I think it's needed. I think the city of Lowell has actually done some really great things in terms of following up, sending public safety and emergency responders to follow up with those who have overdosed and ended up in emergency rooms to try to coordinate getting them into care, detox, and treatment. That's a great program. However, I think when you have somebody in the emergency room who's clearly in need of help, I think having a 72-hour hold to be able to try to get them to agree to commit to treatment would be a really necessary thing that I'd love to work with the governor on. In addition to that, I mean, this is just such a devastating crisis. Just as recently as yesterday, I'm out knocking on doors and spoke to someone in Pepperell who had a problem with the civil commitment system, Section 35. I'd love to work on improving the treatment of those who are committed civilly through that section.
Thank you. The next question goes to Rick Sobey, and then we'll go to Ed Kennedy first.
How do you define the term leadership? And can you give an example in your professional career of an instance where your leadership helped others?
I think what comes to mind most immediately was my time as mayor, and specifically on the issue of the location of the high school. I think that there were several points last year at which leadership was really important. You may recall that back in June, the city council had voted 5-4 to put the high school out near Colley Stadium. At that point and at that meeting, I asked that there be a a referendum put on the ballot. The referendum was not put on the ballot, but it was very important that the city council take a vote on that because that enabled people to go out and put the referendum on the ballot. I think that later on in the summer, in August, when the school committee was able to go to court, that was a pretty courageous move by the school committee. And it wasn't successful, but it did draw our attention and made the MSBA pay attention to the high school issue and the fact that the school committee had been left out of the process. So my time's run out, but I would point to that issue as number one.
Bill Martin?
So I think leadership is a way of acting as a good example for people that you expect to follow, follow you, and then try to convince people to your point of view and have them support that position. An example of leadership I would point to is when I was first elected to the City Council. I proposed a program called 2 for Lowell. It was a housing program that assisted first-time home buyers that would buy a 2, 3, or 4-family house. A new idea. We had never tried anything like it in the city, but I thought it was a good idea. It was good for the neighborhood I came from, near the Sacred Heart School and the Prince Macaroni Factory. And I was able to propose that program, get it funded, get my colleagues on the council to support it overwhelmingly, and then implement it and have it run for a good 10 years before the funding source ran out. So I think leadership is not only the way to present yourself and opposing point of view, but also you got to bring people together.
Thank you. Terry Ryan?
My leadership discussion will center on my position as the chairman of the Westford School Committee. As Chris mentioned, I was on the school committee for the past 6 years. This past year, I was chairman. We had the transgender policy come before us that we had to address. It was adamant in my mind that we had to pass this policy. We developed a policy, we reviewed the policy, and we brought it to public opinion, a public debate at the meeting. After a lively, spirited debate, I'm proud to say that the school committee voted unanimously to pass it. And I believe that was a moment of leadership for me to get that policy written, get that policy out there to be reviewed, and then subsequently get it passed. And I can't tell you how many kids at the school appreciated that because it was something that they felt was important. So I think that was a big moment. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. John Drinkwater?
Sure. Well, I think leadership is sometimes being ahead of the curve and having the foresight to know that something is right, maybe before everybody else catches up. And I'd actually like to cite an example through my career as legislative director at the Massachusetts AFL-CIO. About a decade ago, we supported legislation that actually extended protections to transgender individuals in things like housing and against employment discrimination. And what was left out of that bill at the time was provisions that also prevented discrimination in public accommodations, places like restaurants and hotels. And so that came up again. It was proposed to the legislature in 2016. It was under consideration, and I led a discussion at the Executive Council of the AFL-CIO to get an endorsement from our organization on that bill. We had supported protections in the past. These didn't necessarily relate to employment, but it was the right thing to do. And I think it took some work and it took some discussion to get through some of the misdirection from the other side on that. But ultimately, we supported it and helped secure its passage.
Thank you. And Councilor Elliott, rounding out this question.
Thank you. It was 6 months into my term as the mayor. I was just a young mayor at the time. And 5:45 in the morning, we got a phone call, and I heard over the radio that there was a fire in the city on Branch Street. I turned my car around and I spent the next several days and weeks right at that site when the city experienced one of the worst fires in the city's history. I thought it was important to immediately work with police and fire and the city manager. We established a fund for the victims, but I stayed the course, working with the Red Cross, the Senior Center, making sure that the families had food, they had shelter, they were in hotels, and made sure that they had funding through the various social service agencies that was taking place in the city. We carried it through to the funeral to make sure they had a burial place, and I thought that was a defining moment for the city. The city came together. We raised a significant amount of money, reaching out, developing trust and relationships with one of the largest populations in the city.
Thank you. The next question appropriately will be posed by a college student, Ryan, and the first person to take a crack at this question will be Bill Martin.
Why do you think state college costs are rising so quickly, and how would you keep them under control?
So I don't know what, I think part of the reason colleges' costs are rising is state colleges think as long as they're below the private colleges, that's okay. And I don't think that's the right model. I know this issue well. My wife, Martha, is a graduate here of UMass Lowell, and all three of my children are graduates here at UMass Lowell. So I know what the cost is. I know what the tuition is. I know what loans are. And it's expensive for people. My wife was able to pay her way through college on her own, waiting tables at night. That's no longer possible for anybody, and it's too bad. I don't think the model should be just to be a little bit less expensive than the private schools. I think the model needs to be cost containment. We need to do better, administratively especially, but costs need to just be put under control. We can't have runaway costs, and the answer can't be we're cheaper than Harvard and Yale and the Ivy League schools, because that's not an answer for the people of this district. It's not an answer for the people in the city.
Thank you. Terry Ryan?
Yeah, you know, we have to look at the data behind the numbers. Where is the costs? Where are the public and private colleges spending their money? And I would propose legislation that opens the book. And I know people say it's private colleges, you can't do that. Well, we give them grants. They have tax-free status in some of these areas. We should be able to go get into the books of some of these colleges at some level and understand where this money is being spent. We also have to look at, you know, loan rates. Can we make loan rates deductible, even more affordable, lower the rates? What can we do to reduce the cost? But we can't reduce the cost until we understand where the money is going. And we can't do that without, I believe, legislating it and making them produce the data. So that's what I would
Terry, you were
recommend.
referring to getting into the books of private colleges?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Drinkwater?
Yeah, so I'm quite familiar with the cost of college as well. I'm a proud graduate right here at UMass Lowell. And one thing that really shocks me is that from the time I came into UMass Lowell in 2002 to today, the state is actually putting in 32% less per student. So some of the cost of college on students is actually just the state not carrying its weight, which it needs to absolutely keep up with. And, you know, another thing driving costs, and this actually may not be the most popular thing to say here in this room, is that, you know, I think a lot of public colleges are trying to compete with private institutions in terms of the amenities for students, in terms of, you know, the best dining halls, the best gymnasiums, the best dormitories, and certainly that's something you really like if you're a student, and capital investment in our public institutions of higher ed is important. But at the same time, I actually think, you know, UMass Lowell doesn't need to look just like BU or look just like Northeastern to be a great place to get an education. And I think, you know, some of those investments we should look at to make sure that we are controlling the cost of higher ed for those who seek it through a public institution.
Thank you. Councilor Elliott?
Yeah, state costs. I feel that the state needs to step up a little bit more to provide more funding. Students are taking out loans that are saddling them for 10, 11 years thereafter. That we need to look at lower or no interest loans for the students that need to have, you know, financing in place. I think we need to look at online classes that are becoming more popular, are less expensive, and becoming more effective. I also think, you know, in addition to, you know, students that don't want to go to college or they're interested in another vocation, I think we need to continue to support efforts, and in this latest economic development bond bill, there is workforce capital grants to, you know, those vocational schools to improve equipment, training, and skills for those that want to go into a trade. If you look out now, you can't get skilled trade, skilled labor. You can't get advanced, you know, kids that have advanced abilities to in manufacturing. So I think it's there's no silver bullet for this one, but managing costs is clearly the first place to take a look at.
Thank you. And lastly on this question, Councilor Ed Kennedy?
I think that college costs in private schools are based on what the market will bear, and that's the problem. It's not what the actual budget should be. It's what's the maximum amount that parents will pay in order, or students will pay in order to send their kids to college. I think that the same is probably true in the state system and with the university. I think that it's a good thing that that here in Lowell, if you do 2 years at Middlesex Community College and then 2 years at Lowell, that you can get a bachelor's degree for about $30,000. And I think it's also a good thing that you can also get a bachelor's degree here at Lowell without going into class, just totally online. But I do think that the whole idea of student loan debt, which is a little bit off the subject, is a big issue and it has a huge negative impact on the Massachusetts economy.
Thank you. The next question, Terry, you'll start off with this, and it's going to be posed by Rick Sobey of The Sun.
Would you support state-sanctioned injection facilities for supervised drug use?
You know, I go back to the task force. I go back and I want to work with people. I want to find out that that's what's going to work. I want to understand from the healthcare professionals, is that the tool that we need to use to eliminate this scourge? You know, I'm not in favor of it, but that's my opinion. I need to look, I need to work with other people who are in this business, who are in the field every day, and they know what they're seeing on the streets every day, okay? And so my opinion would be, personally, I don't think that's the answer, but you know what? If the experts say this is the way to go, this is the short-term solution, then maybe that's something you look at.
Thank you, Terry. John?
So I think it deserves a little more study and a better look by the legislature, but I will say it is definitely something that I'm open to supporting. I think the data where it's been tried shows that it does save lives. It does encourage more people to actually seek detox and treatment. And I think one of the things that's really preventing the full consideration of this idea is that there is still a lingering stigma around drug use. But the fact of the matter is that people are injecting drugs in unsafe ways and in unsafe places where they might overdose in a locked bathroom where unfortunately that life could have been saved had it been in a supervised site. So, you know, I think any public policy where the data shows that it could save lives or put more people in treatment deserves some serious consideration.
Thank you, Councilor Elliott.
No, I don't support it. There's no evidence that suggests that these individuals injecting at these sites go and seek additional treatment, or it stems the tide. So I don't think it's a good idea. I think the approach that we talked about earlier, working with the governor to get additional treatment, to get additional support, I think that's the avenue. I think the other thing we have to do is we have to continue to work to get drugs off the street. There's a huge drug problem, and that's where additional resources needs to be focused on as well.
Thank you, Councilor Kennedy.
I could support it just on a trial basis in a certain community just to see if it was effective. I don't think that it's an answer at all. It may provide for safe drug use, but I mean, that's not what our end game should be. And so I don't really see the long-term upside of having something like that. You know, what's bothersome to me is that now we're finding that there are drug users on the street that carry their own Narcan with them, so that they don't care about overdosing because they've got their own Narcan, which is you know, the total opposite of where we should really want to go with this. I just think that this is not. I'd try it on a trial basis to see if it was going to work, but or if it was effective in saving lives. But I think long term, it's really not the way to go, and is certainly doesn't get us to what our goals should be.
Thank you. And lastly, Bill Martin.
No, I wouldn't support this. I think it's a terrible idea. I don't think it's the answer to our problems. I think it would be the death knell for downtowns, not just in places like Lowell, but all across the state and other communities in this district as well. I don't think this is the answer to treatment. There are other treatment methods that have better results. So I think this is a bad idea. I'm not alone in this, by the way. Governor Baker is opposed to this. Marty Walsh, Mayor of Boston, Mayor, long time in recovery, thinks this is a bad idea, and I do too.
Thank you. Okay, we're back at the beginning. John Drinkwater will take this next question posed by Ryan Callahan of UMass Lowell.
If elected, would you pledge to serve a finite number of terms?
No, I'm not ready to take that pledge right now. There are a number of elected officials serving at the state and federal level who I think are doing a great job. And personally, I feel like as long as they're an effective advocate for their constituents and their constituents want to send them back to state or federal legislature, let's not take it out of the hands of the voters. I think democracy is a great thing. And if constituents are no longer happy with those who are serving to represent them, they have every ability to express that at the ballot box. I think challenges are a great thing. I think we could probably use a little more shakeup of the system by challenging incumbents. I think this is all what democracy provides us. I think a policy putting in statute term limits or a pledge to serve a finite number of terms isn't necessarily the way to go. I think, let's keep it in the hands of voters, and as long as they're satisfied with the representation, that's good enough.
Thank you. Councilor Elliott.
No, I wouldn't support to take that pledge. I've been a member of the City Council for 21 years. There's not a day that goes by that I don't try or want to help people. You need to have a passion for the job. You have to want to go and make a difference in the lives of people every day. You have to want to go to the neighborhoods. You have to want to listen to people, respond to them, and take care of their needs. And as long as you do your job, you live up to your promises that you made to the people that you committed to when you ran, then you will be reelected. And if not, then they will have a different tone. So I feel it's the effort, it's the evaluation that voters place on you when it's time to vote, and that's the democratic process, and I believe in it.
Thank you. Councilor Kennedy.
Yeah, I would not take the pledge. Many of you will probably recall that maybe 15 or 20 years ago, this was a sort of a trendy issue. And my recollection is just about everybody that took the pledge at that time reneged on the pledge. I can think of only one person. I can think of only one person that,
who is that?
held to the pledge. I think it might have been Councilor John Leahy's father was the only one that did. And so, I would agree with the previous candidates. I think that the voters should decide when it's time to leave. Thank you.
Councilor Martin.
So I wouldn't take this pledge primarily because I think it makes you ineffective toward the end of your time. When people know your pledge is coming to an end, it's harder for you to accomplish things for your district. So that's my main reason I wouldn't do it. However, people should realize I'm not in this, to be the longest serving career senator. And I've shown that when I think my time is up, I leave. I served eight terms in the city council, 16 years, and I thought I had done my work there, and I stepped away. And I think that's given me perspective now on how I view this job different than the others. So I won't be afraid to walk away when I think it's time, and I've shown that. I have shown that, but I don't want to make myself ineffective in the job.
Thank you. And Terry Ryan from Westford.
I guess I'd round it out by saying I will not take the pledge. I believe in voting. I believe in elections. But when I did run for Congress, I thought it was important to do term limits, and I think at that level it is. I think it's a little different on the local level when you're trying to work within the district. The other thing is, I think when you look at term limits, I think you also tie into that campaign funding. Where does the money come from? So now if you have a long-term incumbent who has a big bankroll, how do you run against that incumbent? So I think this question gets tied in with campaign fundraising, and I think they go together, and I think that's what has to be looked at.
All righty, thank you. Next question will be posed by Rick Sobey of The Sun to Rodney Elliott, I believe.
How will you vote this November on question 1, which seeks to establish patient assignment limits for registered nurses working in hospitals?
I will vote yes to support that ballot question. I am the father of a nurse. I have a second daughter that's a senior, who will become a nurse. I hear scores of stories from my daughter on the workload that they have, the conditions that they have, and the concerns that they have as nurses. So I will support that. I think it makes sense. It's about safety. It's about patient care. It's about getting good quality care, which is the trend, to make sure you get good quality care. One of the significant cost increases in healthcare these days are patients that are readmitted after they are discharged. So I think it makes sense to have ratios. Nurses want to be able to do their job well. Sometimes my daughter's in labor and delivery, and sometimes she has 2 patients when she has 1 because she's caring for the child. I think it makes sense that no matter where you work, there's only so much work that you can do, and it should be about patient care and not cutting costs.
Thank you. Councilor Kennedy.
I will be voting yes on 1. I think that that's part of the problem with the whole healthcare system is that decisions are based on cost rather than on patient care. And so I will vote yes on number 1.
Thank you. Councilor Martin.
So I'm voting no on question 1 because I think it would result in explosion in healthcare costs. Healthcare costs are 40% now of the state budget. Every forum we've had up here, people are talking about the need to rein in healthcare costs. I think this would be an explosion in healthcare costs, and it wouldn't enhance patient care at all. I think I go into hospitals, I've been in hospitals with families and seeing my own family, and we don't really have an issue. The nursing care that I've received, and I've had serious surgeries, has been phenomenal. And I think we get very good care in this state in our hospitals. I think the nurses in the state compromised on a measure a few years ago, and I don't think this is necessary. It would lead to an explosion in healthcare costs.
Thank you. Terry Ryan.
When we get to a question like this, I see this as a failure of the legislature. We should have been able to work this out in the legislature. When you get questions like this, when it's an either or, you don't have a good choice in either situation. You know, nurses are there to support the patients. They do a great job every day. We have community hospitals that really can't afford some costs, and healthcare costs will go up. So you know what? We need to bring this into the legislature. We need to figure it out at the legislative level and work the back and forth, the give and take, the negotiation that goes into these questions. These questions are just too big to put on a ballot. You need to work this out, and you need to work it out so it's the best for the residents. And I think that's what has to be done. So, you know, it goes back to, I'm not sure where I'm going to vote on this, to tell you, to be perfectly honest, because it's something that should have been figured out before it got to this point. And that's what I would do as your state senator. I would make sure we don't have a ballot question like this.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, I'm an enthusiastic yes on question 1. You know, this has been on the books in California for over a decade, where they've actually lowered their patient readmission rates, which is a huge driver of cost in healthcare. They've showed that the law works. And you know, talk to a nurse. Talk to a nurse, and I'm confident you'll hear that at some point they've been overworked, that they've been caring for too many patients, and that they felt it's cost in terms of patient care. You know, in terms of the costs on hospitals, a report just came out as a number of hospitals had reported their executive pay in the last week, and you know, last year, right at this time, there were about 1,000 nurses locked out from Tufts Medical Center in Boston because they were actually trying to negotiate safe staffing ratios. This is something they put off negotiating for wages and benefits because they actually cared about patient safety, and they ultimately couldn't get it accomplished. And then we find out just yesterday or today that the CEO of Wellforce, which is a parent company of Tufts and also Lowell General, received an 83% raise from 2015 to 2016. So I think that's a big driver of cost in healthcare that we could address.
Thank you. Councilor Elliott, did you want to take
No,
another crack at this?
John really brought the issue up, but you know, the issue of costs, if you look at the hospitals, the top performing hospitals across this country, they are making, in the state as well, they are making millions and millions of dollars every single year. And to cut staff when hospitals are making millions, I think that's a mistake.
Thank you. Anyone else on this question? Bill?
So I think the hospitals in this district are struggling to make ends meet. And I think that's demonstrated. I don't support these exorbitant executive salaries either, and I think something should be done about that, but that's not the question. The question is, we're going to support this and increase the problem, and I'm against increasing the problem.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilor
Yeah,
Kennedy?
just briefly, there are community hospitals that do struggle, but more and more we're seeing hospitals gobbled up by big companies that are making a lot of money. So it's, I would, again, yes on 1.
Anyone else?
Like, no, I might as well. You know, it is a bigger question. It's a healthcare question. It's the money that's being raised by these hospitals. It's the money that's being taken in by insurance companies. It's a much bigger picture. My mother-in-law is a nurse. I would never say anything bad about a nurse. My mother is in Duval because she broke her hip last week. I would never say anything wrong. But it's the healthcare issue. It's the whole process. It's the whole system that has to be looked at. And a question like this does not fix the problem.
John, they've all taken another crack. Do you have anything else to say?
Yeah, nurses have tried to address this. I referenced through collective bargaining where they have the opportunity to do it that way. For decades and decades, they've tried to address it in conversations with management through things like unit-based councils. Nothing has worked. They've been forced to the ballot, and I strongly support a yes vote.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad we asked about the ballot question. So sticking with the ballot questions, the next question will be posed by Ryan Callahan of UMass Lowell, and that will go to Ed Kennedy, please.
On question 3, do you support upholding the state law that prohibits discrimination based on gender identity in public places?
Yes, I do. I supported it in 2016, and I support it now. And I'm proud to say that when there was a resolution put before the city council back in 2016 or 2017, that I voted against that resolution, and a majority of the city council joined me. I see no reason for this question to even be on the ballot. Since 2016, I don't know of any instance that would cause a question like this to be on the ballot this year.
Thank you. Councilor Martin?
Yes, I'll vote yes on question 3 to retain the existing law prohibiting discrimination. I don't think we should be discriminating against anyone.
Thank you. Councilor, Terry Ryan?
Don't call me former mayor. I will support this, absolutely, and I've mentioned it earlier that I supported the transgender policy for the school committee, and I think it's important to support this, and this is just another question of why do we have this ballot question?
Thank you. John Drinkwater?
Absolutely. I'm a strong yes on question 3, and I think ultimately what this comes down to is basic acceptance and fairness and dignity for transgender individuals in our society who are just simply looking to be accepted in all public places. So I think we need to send a strong message here in Massachusetts because we're going to be a bit of a bellwether. We're the first state where this has been on the ballot for an up or down vote, and I think it's really important that we all support a yes vote on question 3.
Thank you. And lastly, Councilor Elliott?
Yes, I'll support the bill. I had filed a resolution. I was in support of the House bill that included a provision that the Attorney General issue regulations to protect against individuals who would abuse the law. I felt the House bill would have done a better job in keeping all residents safe, particularly transgender individuals who are often the target of violence and harassment. That being said, the bill passed. I don't believe any person of transgender or anyone should be the target of any form of harassment or discrimination. Everyone deserves to live their lives the way they so choose.
Thank you. Anyone else on that? We're going to move then to the lightning round of questions where I urge the candidates to answer yes or no or just be very succinct. Rick Sobey is going to pose these questions, and we'll start at the opposite end of the podium tonight. We'll start with Terry Ryan, and we'll just go down the line, okay? So Rick, go right ahead.
Yes or no? Would you ever vote to increase your salary?
Wow.
They
I'm
do it
not
now,
even sure
so-
what the salary is now. If I say no, I'm held to it till the day I die. So, I will say if I'm there long enough and the salary
One
needs to
word.
be, yes.
Thank you.
I guess thought I had a little more time.
Bill
Yes.
Martin.
So no, and I never have.
Thank you. Ed Kennedy.
Yes.
No, and I voted no already.
John Drinkwater.
Yes.
Thank you.
What letter grade would you give Governor Charlie Baker?
Terry.
B.
Bill Martin.
I was going to say B, so I'll stick with that.
You don't have to.
Yep.
Ed Kennedy.
B minus.
I give an A.
C.
John Drinkwater. C. Okay. Rick.
The better 2020 presidential candidate, Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders?
Me?
Yes.
Joe Biden.
Joe Biden.
Joe Biden.
Let's go with Joe.
Biden.
Wow, okay, very good. And the last question, Rick? Terry?
Should legislative seats in constitutional offices have term limits?
Like I said earlier, There should be a difference. State legislature should not. I believe federal offices should.
Thank you. Bill?
No, and I've demonstrated I know when to walk away.
Ed?
Constitutional officers should, legislature, no.
Rodney?
No.
And John?
No.
Okay, very good. That concludes our lightning round, contestants. We'll resume normal questioning now. The next question, I believe, will go to Bill Martin, and will be posed by Rick, if my rotation is correct. Oh, Ryan.
Should the governor, executive branch, and legislature be held to the same standards of open meetings and public records as municipal bodies?
Yes.
Do you want to elaborate on that?
Well, I thought we're still in the lightning stuff, right?
No, we've gone past that now.
All right. Okay. Well, yeah, there's no reason not to. I mean, I've served 16 years in City Hall under the open meeting law, public records law. I think it makes for better government. And I think there's no reason why the state shouldn't adopt or abide by the same rules that it imposes on others. In fact, I got a question from a Sun reporter today about what my biggest criticism of the legislature was.
Yes.
And that's what I said, not living up to its own mandates and things that the legislature either imposes on itself and doesn't follow through on, or imposes on others and doesn't do itself.
Terry Ryan.
Absolutely, they should be held to the same standards. I think we saw in this last budget cycle that a lot of things were held up, a lot of bills didn't get passed, things like that, because they were held up in conference committees and this, that, and the other thing, and we didn't really know what was going on until the last minute. So yes, absolutely.
Thank you. John Drinkwater?
I would support some expansion of open record and public meeting laws. I don't think it makes sense in all circumstances. For example, with conference committees, I don't think, I think sometimes when you open things up to the public, people play to the public and bring politics into certain situations where it's not actually productive for shaping public policy. So I'm not sure if this question references things like conference committees being open to the public. I would have reservations about that. Just, to open it up for grandstanding and, kind of playing to the public for
Perhaps
political
they
reasons.
should, though, because so much business at the State House is accomplished in conference committees, which is closed. Councilor Elliott?
Yes, I support the same standard that we have on the municipal level for state and federal government. I think it makes sense. People want open, they want their government transparent. We advertise and televise as many meetings as we can, and I think that's important. People want to be engaged. There are very strict criteria that you can go behind closed doors to have discussions, and it's usually personnel or contracts. That is in the best interest. But other than that, I believe all information, public record requests, they should be facilitated, and we should just let people see how the government works and what is going on at every level of government, including conference committees.
Thank you. And Councilor Kennedy?
Yes, I think it should. I think that more and more people are demanding transparency, and I think that this would lend itself to more transparency. I also think that rather than to make the conference committees more political, I think it would make them less political because they would be transparent. And I don't know what goes on in the conference committees, but I would suspect that it's pure politics all of the time. So I would be for this all the way.
Okay, thank you. The next question will go to Terry Ryan. We hit on this issue a little bit earlier tonight concerning community hospitals. It will be posed by Rick Sobey of the Sun.
What is the best way for the state to support community hospitals that suffer from low reimbursement rates compared to the big Boston hospitals?
I think we have to look at the reimbursement rates and raise the reimbursement rates for community hospitals. Boston hospitals have a monopoly on a lot of these funds from insurance companies. I think we have to look at that. We have to support our community hospitals and the people that work in them. So yes, I think that's one thing, that's the best way that we can do is look at these reimbursement rates and raise them for the community hospitals.
Thank you. John Drinkwater.
So I think ideally, the best solution would be a market-based solution that encourages more people to use community hospitals, which oftentimes have lower costs than big Boston teaching hospitals. For example, my wife and I had our 3 kids at Lowell General and had a great healthcare experience there, and felt no need to go into Boston for something like that where you can get just as good a service at Lowell General. So to the extent that we can actually encourage more people to use community hospitals, I think would be a good thing. However, I also do support more of a blunt instrument, something that was included in the House bill that recently died in conference committee before getting to the governor's desk, that would actually take a fee or fees from large hospitals and use them to reimburse community hospitals to make sure that they're staying strong. So I think until we can change the culture, encourage more people to use their community hospitals, we need to use any method possible to make sure they stay strong, including sometimes taking from the bigger hospitals to support them.
Wouldn't you love to know what went on in that conference committee? Councilor Elliott.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that fees assessed in the House bill makes a lot of sense. It was around $200 million that would go specifically to community hospitals. We have one of the best community hospitals, I believe, in the state. Right here in Lowell Community Health Center. I had a daughter that worked there over the summer. They provide invaluable service to the community. They treat patients with very good quality care, and it restricts emergency room visits. So it's cutting back on healthcare costs, providing good quality service, and the way to do that, yes, change the rates. The Senate can change the rate floor. I think I would vote to do that, but I think also assessing a fee on these hospitals that are making millions and millions of dollars makes sense in order to support these community hospitals, everybody should get fair and equal quality treatment, and that's a good way to achieve that.
Thank you, Councilor Kennedy.
Thank you. I think that I think community hospitals are important. I think there's a lot to like about Lowell, and one of the things that there is to like about Lowell is the fact that we have 2 community hospitals, or at least 2 campuses for community hospitals, and I think that that's important. And if there ever is a time or a night when you need to get to the hospital really quick, I think everybody appreciates that we have the community hospital right there. However, in terms of the finances for that hospital, it's really part of a larger question, which involves the entire healthcare system and just revamping the entire healthcare system, or doing something with it that will make it make more sense than what it does now. I think to try to address the healthcare system on a piecemeal basis doesn't make a lot of sense, and a lot of times you take care of one problem and 2 other problems pop up someplace else. So I would rather see a whole revamp of the healthcare system rather than just to address rates at community hospitals.
Thank you. And lastly, Councilor Martin.
So I think it's a little ridiculous to try and answer this question when you're going to support the ballot question to raise the cost of these community hospitals by millions of dollars via the ballot question. It's a little bit like saying, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how did you like the play? I think, the ballot question is going to cripple community hospitals. And I think that's where it's got to start. And if people care about these costs, they should be opposed to that ballot question. I would have supported either the House or the Senate version, sort of the minimum wage approach or the reimbursement approach through an assessment on bigger hospitals. I think either one of those approaches would work. I'd support either one, but it's not going to happen if we pass that ballot question. A lot of these hospitals are going to go out of business.
Thank you. This is going to be our last question before we get to the closing statements. But John, you want another crack at that?
Yeah, I mean, are we saying that we're willing to sacrifice patient safety in order to save costs at community hospitals? I think the data shows that question 1, safe staffing, can save costs by lowering readmission rates, but is going to result in better health care and patient safety overall. So I'm certainly not willing to say that, I'm willing to sacrifice safety in order to keep costs low at hospitals. As I mentioned, there's rampant, CEO pay and some exorbitant salaries. I'd rather look there first than voting no on question 1.
Anyone else on this issue? Bill?
So it's not about patient safety, it's about cost. Everybody up here has talked about what a great experience they had at Lowell General Hospital. We don't need the ballot question to have good patient outcomes at Lowell General Hospital.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, we don't have time for another. Ed.
Just say,
Make it fast.
I've never had a good experience at Lowell General Hospital. I'm just happy that it's there when you need it. That's all.
So we've asked about 10 questions, and we've got to move on now to the closing statements. You have 90 seconds. We'll start on the opposite end tonight. Terry, you can start, and we'll work down this way.
Okay. I'd just like to thank University of Massachusetts Lowell and the Lowell Sun for hosting the debate tonight. I'd also like to acknowledge my fellow candidates here. So, political engagement, short little talk. Political engagement is the foundation of our democracy. And I applaud any person with the courage and commitment to step up and put the time, the effort, and the money into running for public office. So thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it. Everybody running. With that said, I'm here today because I believe I'm the best candidate for this job. I wouldn't be here otherwise. I have the experience, the temperament, and the leadership to represent the residents of the 1st Middlesex District. Based on that, I ask for your vote on September 4th. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Terry. Former City Councilor Bill Martin.
Thank you, and with all due respect to Terry, I think I'm the best person for the job. And I'll tell you why. You know, I'm from Lowell, obviously. I think most of us are not from rich backgrounds, humble beginnings. I grew up in the Sacred Heart Parish. My mother was a clerk at Prince Macaroni around the corner. My father was a union worker at New England Telephone. So I come from a union family. I know the value of hard work, and I grew up appreciating that. I was fortunate enough to go to good schools. I went to Holy Cross College, Boston College Law School, where I did well, where I was an honor student, received many awards. I went to work at a big Boston law firm, Hale and Dorr, the same firm, incidentally, Bob Mueller went to work for after he left the FBI for a brief period of time. But I didn't want to stay there. I wanted to come back to this area. I wanted to come back and practice law here. I met Luino, a well-respected Lowell lawyer from Westford, and we formed a law firm. We hire people. We have a small business, and that informs my life experience. I know what it's like to make a payroll. I know what it's like to have other people depending on you for their job. And I think that informs my work. It informed my work on the city council, where I work to bring jobs and economic development opportunities to this area. Look at what's been built around Lowell in the last 15 years. New office building at Jeanne d'Arc, new branch at Jeanne d'Arc, a new dorm. Those are the things that inform my experience. That's why I'm the best candidate, and that's why I want to represent the people of Dunstable, the people of Groton, the people of Lowell, Pepperell, Tingsboro, and Westford.
Thank you. Ed Kennedy.
Thank you. I'd just like to thank the host for sponsoring this forum. I became a candidate for the state senate on April 11th of this year, which was after the state senate seat had become vacant. For the past 4 months, my supporters and I have campaigned in every community and in most neighborhoods throughout the district. And occasionally, a voter will ask me, why are you running for the state senate? Those of us who have served in municipal government know very well that state government has a profound impact on all of our municipalities in the 1st Middlesex District and across the Commonwealth. More and more communities across Massachusetts have become dependent on the state legislature for local aid and public school funding, as well as grants and participation in various incentive programs. I divide the issues in this election into 2 categories. Local issues that impact one or all of the 6 communities in the Senate District, and statewide issues that affect the entire Commonwealth. Locally, creative economic development incentives, public infrastructure improvements, and adequate funding for public education will always be important and at the top of the agenda. However, statewide issues such as the opioid crisis and the student debt problem also require effective solutions, and we need to better address those issues now. I have served on the Lowell City Council since 2012, and I have served as the mayor of Lowell in 2016 and 2017. I am a lifelong Democrat and a longtime member of both the Democratic City Committee and the Democratic State Committee. As your state senator, I will bring experience and a record of effectiveness to the state Senate, and I will be a strong advocate for all 6 communities in the 1st Middlesex District and those who need a louder voice.
Thank you, Ed
Beacon
Kennedy.
Hill.
Councilor Elliott.
First, I'd like to thank the Lowell Sun and UMass for sponsoring this debate. Look, I'm a high-energy person. I'm a tireless worker. I'm optimistic about our future and what we can accomplish together. I've been knocking on doors every night since February. I've been out to ask what your priorities are, and they're common sense issues: safe schools, the environment, transportation. I've been to the town's selectmen's meetings, school committee meetings, parades, events, festivals, to listen and to learn. As the mayor, I attended over 800 events in 2 years because I wanted to. That's the level of energy, that's the level of commitment and dedication you'll get from me every single day if I'm elected. My background as an aide to the state senator from the district, along with my education, my 36 years of professional experience, and drive to get things done, will make me an effective state senator on day one. Since February, I pledged to be a full-time state senator, to be accessible at all times, to hold meetings in your coffee shops, in the senior centers, the libraries, the town halls. That's the job. That's what needs to be done. I'll step down from the council, as I mentioned, because I feel it's improper to hold two positions. The people of the 1st Middlesex District deserve someone who will make them their priority. I will make you, your needs, your issues my focus. I respectfully ask for your vote on Election Day for Rodney Elliott for State Senate. Thank you.
Thank you. And wrapping up, John Drinkwater.
I want to thank the debate hosts here tonight, UML and the Lowell Sun, as well as the panelists and my fellow candidates. It's been a real privilege to stand on stage with you here tonight and to campaign alongside you. I'm running for state senate because we have some big problems that we need to address here in this district and in the state. Our public schools are underfunded. That's a fact. And every day that that remains a fact is a day that we're shortchanging our children. And that's one day too many. And we're all accountable for that. Higher ed gets less and less affordable and less attainable every single year. That includes right here at UMass Lowell, a place that's near and dear to my heart, that helped me get me onto this stage here in this position. We need to get to a point where any student who earns a spot at this university over at Middlesex can afford to go. And right now, that's not the case. And that means there are kids who aren't seeing through their full potential and who don't get to see through opportunities that they have. And we're all accountable for that. We need to solve that problem. I'm asking voters here in the 1st Middlesex District to put their faith in me, to go to Beacon Hill, to work every single day to help solve these problems. I think I can make a difference down there, and I promise you, I will give this job my heart and soul when we're down there to solve these problems. If you believe, like I do, that it's our job to give the next generation the best possible chance, give me a chance. I have 3 very good reasons sitting at home right now to do that. And again, I'm John Drinkwater, and I ask for your vote on September 4th. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Well, let's give the candidates a hand.